The Athenaeum garden hung in the void like a teardrop of impossible life. A kilometer-wide bubble of cultivated gravity and bioluminescent flora orbiting the azure and ivory swirl of the Litherian capital. Below, the planet itself seemed to hold its breath. Today was the choosing. Princess Serenia, heir to the Litherian Empire, her skin possessing the faint radiant luster of her bloodline, stood on the central dais. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and engineered star bloom. Around her, arranged in a semicircle of optimized perfection, were the suitors. There was Duke Xylos of the Andromeda Corps, his genes sculpted so thoroughly that his skin resembled polished, living marble. Beside him, Warlord Thrax, whose family had conquered the Keltari systems, stood rigid in his dress armor, his eyes burning with the biotic fire of his enhancements. There were others, heirs from planetary dynasties, genetically modified kings whose ancestors had paid scientists to erase all human frailties, and warlords who offered fleets as a dowry. It was the greatest gathering of galactic power in a generation. And it was a humiliation. Serenia's father, the Emperor, watched from his gravity throne, his face a mask of regal expectation. The choosing was a formality, of course. She was expected to choose Xylos, solidifying an alliance that would control 2/3 of the quadrant's trade. "By the stars and the blood of our line," the high priest droned, his voice amplified by the garden's acoustic field. "Let the princess choose her consort. Let the empires merge." Serenia looked at Xylos. He smiled, a perfect bloodless expression. She looked at Thrax. He was already scanning the crowd for threats. Her gaze drifted past them, past the warlords and the genetic kings, to the edge of the dais, standing near the containment field that separated the lush garden from the hard vacuum of space. He was just a man. Cade, her tutor in ancient Terran languages, a low-profile human attached to the diplomatic corps, listed as a cultural exchange expert. He wore a simple dark gray tunic of soft Terran fibers, a stark contrast to the metallic silks and armor plate of the others. He had no known family and no wealth, no political ties. He was watching the planet below, seemingly more interested in the cloud patterns than the ceremony. The silence stretched. The high priest cleared his throat. "Princess." The Emperor's voice was a quiet command. Serenia turned. She took a breath, the sound impossibly loud in the suspended quiet. She walked. She walked past the marble-skinned Duke, whose smile faltered and cracked. She walked past Warlord Thrax, who actually growled as he realized she was not moving toward him. The court gasped. It started as a single collective intake of breath, a shocked vacuum. She stopped in front of the human. Cade looked up, his eyes, a simple, unremarkable shade of gray-green, meeting hers. The galaxy seemed to narrow to the space between them. He did not look surprised, nor did he look arrogant. He just looked present. "I choose him," Serenia said. Her voice was not a shout, but it ripped through the garden like a plasma blade. She held out her hand. Cade looked at it for a moment, then at her face. He seemed to be reading something in her expression, a silent question she had been asking for months. He nodded once, a small, private gesture. He took her hand. The silence broke. It was not with applause. It was with laughter. A high-pitched titter began from the Duchess of Kor, which was quickly overtaken by a booming, incredulous laugh from Warlord Thrax. The court erupted. The sound was sharp, cruel, and absolute. She chose the Terran. A human. The pet. Duke Xylos looked physically ill, his marble skin flushing a shade of faint, angry violet. "This is an insult," he hissed. "It is." The Emperor's voice cut through the noise, low and dangerous. A cosmic humiliation. He rose from his throne, the garden's gravity shifting to accommodate his movement. He stared at his daughter, his eyes two chips of burning ice. "You jest, Serenia," he said. "I do not," Serenia replied. Her hand tightened in Cade's. His grip was warm, solid, unmoving. "You choose this nothing, over the stability of our empire, over alliances that have held for 500 years? You choose a species known for its weakness, its short life, its broken homeworld? I choose a man I respect," she said, her voice shaking but not breaking. "You choose a beggar," her father snarled, "and you will make us all beggars." He turned, his cape swirling. "The choosing is done. The shame is complete." He left the dais. The court, seeing their cue, began to disperse, but not before casting looks of pity, disgust, and raw mockery at the new couple. "A Terran's servant," one noblewoman whispered, loud enough for all to hear. "She's soiled the bloodline." Through it all, Cade said nothing. He did not look at the fleeing court. He did not look at the enraged emperor. He only looked at Serenia. He raised her hand, the one he was still holding, and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so ancient and so tender it silenced the few who remained to watch. "Thank you," he whispered, "for her alone." "For what?" she whispered back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "For not choosing the marble man. He has no circulation. His hands would freeze." She stared at him, and then, despite the humiliation, despite the rage of her father and the laughter of the galaxy, a small, genuine laugh escaped her. It was the first real thing she had felt all day. She held onto his hand as they walked from the garden, the jeers of the nobles fading behind them, replaced by the quiet, steady presence of the man who had nothing, and had just cost her everything. She remembered the first time she saw that quiet strength. It was a memory she clung to in the days that followed, days filled with the noise of her father's fury and the digitized scorn of 1,000 systems. The memory was from 9 months prior, on a planet that was the exact opposite of the Athenaeum Garden. It was a diplomatic mission, a punishment for a minor protocol breach, sending her to the forgotten Terran archive planet of Xylos 9. It was a dead world, a graveyard of data, where humanity's lost history was stored in dusty, physical archives, the digital versions having long since corrupted. She had been bored, surrounded by Letherian guards whose polished armor reflected the grim, gray dust that covered everything. Her delegation was meeting with the boring, gray-robed archivists. She had wandered off, down a corridor marked Restricted Pre-Expansion Literature. He was there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, a respiration mask hanging around his neck. He was carefully, painstakingly turning the brittle, yellowed pages of a physical book. He was covered in dust. "You should not be here, princess," he said, without looking up. "The air is poorly filtered, ionized dust." She was taken aback. "I am Princess Serenia." "I know," he said, "and you are breathing particles that will lodge in your lungs. Letherian lungs are not designed for Terran negligence." He looked up. His eyes were clear, not intimidated in the slightest. "You should go back." "What are you reading?" she asked, ignoring him. He held up the book. The cover was gone. "Poetry." "Why read it from that? The codex is in the main database." "The database has the words," he said, running a finger gently over the page. "It does not have that feeling. It does not have the scent of the paper, the weight of the history. It does not tell you that someone 5,000 years ago held this exact object." He stood, blowing a cloud of dust from the cover. "This is from a man named Keats. He died young, on old Earth." He was obsessed with the idea that truth and beauty were the same thing. Serenia, raised in a court where truth was a commodity and beauty was a genetic modification, found the concept archaic. That is a foolish idea. Truth is power. Beauty is a tool. Cade smiled, a small, sad smile. That is the Litherian way. It was the Terran way, too. In the end, it is why our world is a ruin and our history is on a dust ball like this. He looked at the page. He wrote, "Beauty is truth. Truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know." He was trying to tell us that the things you feel are more real than the things you own. He had looked at her then, truly looked at her. Your suitors, they offer you star systems, they offer you fleets, they offer you things. Do any of them offer you the truth? She had no answer. She stayed for 4 hours, listening to him read ancient poetry, stories of love, loss, and a strange, profound connection to a single blue planet. He spoke with a humble insight that cut through her royal defenses. He was the first person in her life who was not trying to take something from her, sell her something, or merge an empire with hers. He just wanted to share a poem. Now, standing in a small, private chamber. She remembered that day. Her father had forbidden a state wedding. The court was ordered to shun the ceremony. So they were married in the smallest, oldest chapel on the orbital station, with only 2 of her personal guards as witnesses. Serenia wore a simple white gown. Cade wore the same dark tunic he had worn at the choosing. The ceremony was solemn. The vows, ancient Litherian, spoken into a quiet void, when the priest declared them bonded. Cade did not kiss her. He gently touched his forehead to hers, a gesture of shared thought, of union. "I will not be a good consort, Serenia," he whispered. "I do not want a good consort," she whispered back. "I want a good man." "I am not that either," he said, his voice laced with a sadness she could not understand. "But I will try to be your man." The galaxy, however, did not share the sanctity of the moment. The media storm broke the instant the private marriage was leaked. And it was leaked, Serenia suspected, by her own father's office. The hollow headlines were brutal. They were broadcast across every system in the quadrant, "Princess of Beggars." The headline blared in crimson, 3-dimensional text on the galactic news feed. "Litherian Heir marries planetary dirt." A caricature of Serenia was everywhere, dressed in rags, polishing the boots of a smirking, brutish-looking human who looked nothing like Cade. The human nobody. In-depth reports searched his past. They found nothing. Cade, one newscaster sneered, is not even a full name. He has no lineage, no house, no holdings. He is quite literally a zero. The mockery was endless. On the popular comedy channel Galactic Follies, a skit played showing a Litherian princess marrying a nutrient paste dispenser. Serenia watched it all from their new, isolated quarters on the station. Her father had moved them from the royal wing. They were, in effect, in exile, orbiting the very capital she was meant to one day rule. She was sitting in the dark, the light from the hollows feeds flickering across her face. When the door opened, Cade entered, carrying a tray. He ignored the flickering images of his own humiliation. He walked to the main console, and with a single gesture, the room went dark, the voices of the galaxy silenced. He lit a single, scented candle, the old-fashioned kind, with a real flame. The room was filled with the scent of sandalwood. "They are calling me the Princess of Beggars," Serenia said, her voice small. "I saw," Cade said. He placed the tray on the table. It held a bowl of steaming soup and a piece of dark bread. "You have not eaten in 2 days. How can you be so calm? They are calling you a servant, a zero, a pet. Words, Cade said, sitting opposite her. He pushed the bowl toward her. They are just words. They are sounds people make when they are afraid. Afraid? They are laughing at us. They are afraid of what you did, he said, his voice quiet but intense. You broke the rules. You chose something real over something profitable. To people who have built their entire lives on profit, that is terrifying when it makes them question their own choices. He picked up the bread. They can call me a servant. They can call me a zero. It does not change the fact that you are here, with me. Eat. Serenia. She looked at the soup, and then at him. The candlelight softened the lines of his face, hiding the unremarkable and revealing a profound, grounded strength. She ate. He watched her, not with the possessive eye of a warlord, but with the quiet attention of a guardian. When she finished, he took the bowl, but he did not move away. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. They were cold. He began to rub them, his thumbs pressing into her palms. They are wrong, she whispered. Let them be wrong, he said. He leaned in, kissing her palm, then her wrist. His affection was fierce, a sudden heat in the cold room. He pulled her from the chair, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and carried her toward the bedroom. His love was not like the cold calculations of the Litherian court, nor the brutish posturing of the warlords. It was a physical manifestation of his words on Xylos 9. It was about truth. It was deep and slow and sensual, a fire that burned away the shame and the ridicule. He was meticulous, worshipful, his hands and his mouth remapping her world, tearing down the princess and finding the woman. It was a validation. It was an anchor. It was a claim. Later, much later, the station was silent. The city lights of the planet below were a river of diamonds. Serenia lay curled against him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady, slow beat of his heart. The media, the court, her father. It all seemed impossibly distant, a cold, dead star. Here, in this bed, was the only warmth in the galaxy. She felt a peace that was so profound it frightened her. Cade, she whispered into the darkness, I am here. I have an entire fleet at my command, the Radiant Aegis. 10,000 ships, the most powerful military force in the quadrant. I have guards whose only purpose is to die for me. I know. She lifted her head, looking at him in the faint starlight filtering through the viewport. Why do I feel safer with you than with my entire fleet? He was silent for a long time. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch impossibly gentle. Because the fleet protects your title, he said, his voice soft. I will protect you. She believed him. She laid her head back down, closing her eyes, and for the first time since the choosing, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Cade held her, his breathing even with hers. He waited 1 hour, then 2. Only when he was certain she was lost to the world did he move. He slid from the bed with a silence, a practiced grace, that was almost inhuman. He stood by the massive viewport, a dark silhouette against the sea of stars. He was naked, his body not the chiseled, modified perfection of the suitors, but the lean, roped muscle of a predator, scars, thin and white, mapping his torso, invisible in the dim light. He raised his left hand. For a second, he seemed to be admiring the simple, unadorned wedding band. Then he pressed his thumb to his wrist. A nearly invisible interface shimmered into existence, projecting a tiny encrypted data stream, not onto the glass, but directly onto his retina. It was an archaic, untraceable Terran code. The light pulse was brief. The message, decoded, was 5 words. You've been found. Protocol Flame 6 activated. Cade stared at the message, his face impassive. The reflection in the viewport showed the truth. The gentle, humble scholar was gone. The calm, sensual lover was a mask. In their place was something else, something cold, something ancient, and something with the absolute terrifying resolve of a man who had just been told his sanctuary was on fire. He looked back at Serenia, her radiant skin glowing softly in the dark. A flicker of genuine warmth, of fierce possession, crossed his features. Then the mask settled again. He had just married the heir to the galaxy's most powerful throne, and he had just been discovered. The game was beginning. The honeymoon was a political maneuver, thin as a containment field. They were sent to Cygnus Alpha, a mid-rim planet of shimmering, cantilevered cities built into massive, crystal-shot canyons. It was neutral territory, a place for high-stakes trade summits and quiet espionage, and the perfect stage for the galaxy to inspect the Litherian Empire's new cosmic humiliation. Serenia felt the eyes on them from the moment they disembarked. The air was warm and smelled of ionized minerals and the planet's native, violet-hued flora. She wore the formal robes of her house, radiant and imposing. Cade, beside her, wore a simple, tailored black suit of Terran cut. He looked more like her assistant than her consort, and the gathered dignitaries noted it with thinly veiled smirks. "It is a beautiful world," Cade remarked, his voice pitched for her ears alone as they walked the landing platform. "The architecture follows the planet's natural fault lines, an old Terran principle. Build with the world, not against it." "They are not here to admire the architecture, Cade," Serenia murmured, smiling regally for the welcome drones. "They are here to see the fool I married. They are here to watch me fail." "Then we must endeavor," he replied, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture of quiet possession. "To disappoint them." The grand gala was held in the Ethelred Spire, a needle of polished obsidian that scraped the lower atmosphere. Its grand hall was a cavern of light, the walls holographic projections of the star-dusted nebulae outside. The air hummed with the sound of 500 conversations. The clinking of crystal, and the subtle atonal music of the Vron. Nobles from a dozen systems drifted through the room, their gowns and uniforms a breathtaking display of wealth and power. Serenia felt the familiar weight of her role settle on her. She was a princess, and this was her battlefield. She smiled, she nodded, she parried the barbed pleasantries. Cade was a shadow at her side, polite, unremarkable, and silent. He accepted a glass of pale blue liquid, tasted it, and held it, observing the crowd with the mild interest of a tourist. Then, Princess Kaelin of the Vron Ascendancy cut a path through the crowd. Kaelin was tall, her skin the color of oiled bronze, her black hair bound in severe metallic rings. Her house had recently lost a major Helium-3 contract to Serenia's father, and her enmity was legendary. She moved like a predator, her eyes fixed on them. "Princess Serenia," Kaelin purred, her voice carrying in a sudden lull. "What a bold statement you are making tonight." "Princess Kaelin, I am merely attending a gala," Serenia replied, her tone perfectly neutral. "Oh, but you are doing so much more," Kaelin said, her eyes sliding to Cade. "You are proving that the Litherian Empire is truly committed to interspecies charity." The insult hung in the air, sharp and precise. Serenia felt her blood flash hot. "My marriage is not a political statement, Kaelin. It is a personal bond." Of course," Kaelin said, her smile widening. She held a flute of dark, viscous Vronian wine, the color of a fresh bruise. "We all heard of your passion. It is so refreshing to see a royal heir embrace such base instincts." She stepped closer, as if to share confidence. But really, my dear, you must have your attendants better trained. This one has been staring, and with a fluid, accidental tilt of her wrist, Kaelin poured the entire flute of dark red wine down the front of Cade's black suit. The liquid struck his chest and spread, a vivid, sticky stain. The music stuttered. The hundreds of conversations died. Every eye in the grand hall snapped to them. Serenia gasped, horrified. This was a calculated public humiliation, designed to shatter her composure. Kaelin feigned shock. Oh, my deepest apologies. It seems I've soiled your attendant. She looked at Cade with utter contempt, her voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. But then, Terran's servants are so easily replaced. Are they not? Serenia's hand clenched. She opened her mouth, a retort burning on her tongue, ready to unleash the full diplomatic and military fury of her empire on this arrogant woman. Before she could speak, Cade acted. He did not flinch. He did not curse. He simply looked down at the spreading stain. Then he looked up at Kaelin, and he smirked. It was a small, knowing, utterly disarming expression. He gently plucked the embroidered silk napkin from Kaelin's stunned hand. He dabbed uselessly at the stain for a moment, then sighed, as if disappointed in the wine itself. A pity, Cade said, his voice calm, yet it carried across the silenced hall. Such a waste of good wine. He met Kaelin's furious gaze. But as my ancestors used to say, a fool and his gold are soon parted. Or in this case, he glanced at the puddle on the floor. Her wine. A few nobles gasped. The insult was a perfect, elegant return, subtle yet devastating. Cade smiled warmly at the crowd, who were now watching Kaelin with new amusement. It seems, he continued, that some value their status so highly, they are forced to spill it on the floor for all to see. A terrible waste of vintage. Laughter, hesitant at first, then bold, rippled through the onlookers. They were tired of Kaelin's arrogance, and this quiet, unremarkable human had just dismantled her in 6 words. Kaelin's bronze skin flushed a dark, angry purple. She was speechless. Cade turned his back on her, a dismissal more profound than any shout. He offered his arm to Serenia, the stained sleeve notwithstanding. "Shall we, my love?" he said, his voice warm and intimate. "This vintage is clearly not to my taste. I believe I saw some Aldebaran whiskey by the terrace." Serenia stared at him, her prepared fury dissolving into stunned admiration. She took his arm, her touch firm. "Yes," she said, her voice clear. "Let's—" They walked away, leaving Princess Kaelin frozen in a puddle of her own spite, the laughter of her peers following her like a shroud. They found a quieter section of the gala, a long open-air terrace overlooking the canyon city. The lights of the spire glittered below them like fallen stars. Serenia was still vibrating from the encounter. "That," she said, finally letting out a shaky breath, "was impressive. You handled her better than my entire diplomatic corps could have." "She was playing a game she did not understand," Cade said. He was leaning against the balustrade, looking at the alien sky. The stain on his suit was already drying, leaving a dark, ugly map. "She thought the prize was your composure. She did not realize the audience was the prize." You are full of surprises," Serenia said, studying him. "Where does a cultural expert learn to dismantle a Vronian princess? Humans learn to fight with words long before we learn to fight with ships. Serenia, we had to. We were very good at killing each other." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Just an old saying." She was about to press him, to ask what else his ancestors used to say. When the night shattered, it was a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow detaching itself from the darker shadows of an alcove above them. A shape, black on black, dropping toward them, silent as the vacuum of space. Serenia only had time to gasp, to see the glint of a vibroblade, its edge humming with a molecular disruption field. It was aimed directly at Cade's back. The man who had charmed a room with poetry and patience vanished. Cade moved in a blur that defied physics. He did not simply dodge, he anticipated. Before Serenia's brain had even processed the threat, he was in motion. He spun, not away from the blade, but into the attack. His left arm shot up, intercepting the assassin's wrist. There was a sickening, wet crack of bone and sinew. The vibroblade clattered to the marble floor. Cade's other hand, moving in a precise fluid arc, struck the assassin at the juncture of his neck and shoulder. It was not a punch, it was a strike, economical and perfect. The assassin, a large armored man, collapsed instantly, his systems shut down, unconscious before he hit the ground. The entire event took less than 2 seconds. As the body fell, Serenia saw something else. A small, dark device, no bigger than her thumb, fell from Cade's own sleeve, where it had been concealed. A microfilament, thinner than a hair and dark as shadow, was instantly retracting into it. It had been that filament that intercepted the assassin's arm, faster than nerve impulses, breaking the bone with synthetic tension. It was not Litherian technology. It was not Vron or Keltari. It looked Terran, but an advanced, militaristic, and utterly forbidden version of it. Cade palmed the device, slipping it back into his sleeve with a movement so practiced it was invisible. He was breathing calmly, not even flushed, merely brushing at the sleeve of his stained suit as if annoyed by a second interruption. "Cade!" Serenia cried, her hand flying to her mouth. The commotion brought guards. They rushed onto the terrace, weapons drawn, their armor clattering. They surrounded the fallen assassin, checking him for vitals. "He's alive, Princess, just unconscious," the captain reported, his gaze sweeping the terrace. "What happened?" Cade straightened his suit jacket. "He slipped," he said, his voice utterly placid. "The balustrade is lower than regulation. He fell from the alcove. A terrible accident." The captain stared at the vibroblade on the ground, then at the unconscious man, then at Cade. He clearly did not believe a word of it. Serenia was frozen. She was staring at her husband, the reflexes, the cold precision, the forbidden hidden technology. That was not the move of a scholar. That was not the move of a cultural expert. That was the calculated lethal efficiency of a trained killer. Back in their private quarters, the silence was a physical weight. The spire's luxurious suite, with its panoramic views, felt like a cage. Serenia was pacing, her hands clenched. Cade was on the far side of the room, calmly removing his stained and now slightly torn suit jacket. He folded it and placed it on a chair. "You're not a tutor," Serenia said, her voice shaking. "You're not just a cultural expert." "It was an unfortunate encounter," Cade said, unbuttoning his cuffs, and he was avoiding her eyes. "He tried to kill you. Cade, he came out of the shadows with a vibroblade, and you... She stopped, trying to find the words. "You didn't even look surprised. You moved like..." "Like what, Serenia?" he asked, finally turning to face her. His eyes, the gentle, amused scholar from the gala, was gone. The tender lover from their wedding night was gone. This man was a stranger. His gaze was flat, cold, and assessing. "Like a weapon," she whispered, "like a living, breathing weapon." He walked toward her, and for the first time she felt a tremor of actual fear. He stopped just inches from her. "I am what I need to be," he said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "I am what I need to be to keep you safe. Is that not what I promised you?" "That is not an answer," she shot back, her fear replaced by a rising tide of anger. "Who are you?" "I am your husband. That is not who you are. That is what you are to me. I want to know who you are." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. "There are things you are safer not knowing. Serenia, not yet." "Safer?" "Cade, a man just tried to assassinate you at a state gala. I think we are past safe." "He failed," Cade said simply, as if that explained everything. He turned away, dismissing the conversation, and began to unbutton his shirt. The evasion, the cold wall he had erected, was more terrifying than the assassin's blade. The danger, the adrenaline, the sudden violent reveal of this hidden side of him, it all coiled in her, twisting fear into something else, something raw and desperate. She moved before she thought. She grabbed his shoulder, spinning him back around, and she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was hard, and angry, and demanding. It was a physical confrontation, a desperate attempt to breach the walls he had built, to find the man she thought she knew. For a moment, he remained rigid, a statue of cold control. Then, something in him snapped. He kissed her back, and the force of it stole her breath. His hands were in her hair, one at her back, pulling her against him until there was no space, no air. The passion was not the slow, sensual burn of their wedding night. This was a wildfire. It was a clash of wills, a raw, almost violent claim. He lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her from the main room, never breaking the kiss. He was not tender. He was possessive, his mouth devouring hers, his hands gripping her with a strength that bordered on pain. She met him with equal force. She was terrified of this stranger, and she was incandescently drawn to him. The man who quoted poetry and the man who broke bones were in her arms, and she wanted all of him. Later, tangled in the sheets, the city lights painting them in shades of electric blue. She lay breathing heavily, her body bruised and alive. He was holding her, his grip still tight, as if she might drift away. She felt it again, that same feeling from their wedding night, but magnified 1,000 times. A coiled energy, a massive ancient power, leashed and held in check just beneath his skin. "What are you holding back?" she whispered into the darkness, her voice hoarse. "I can feel it when it feels ancient, it feels powerful. What are you?" He kissed her forehead, a long, lingering press of his lips. He said nothing, but it was an answer in itself, a confirmation. She fell into a restless sleep, his silence her only companion. When she woke, it was hours later. The first, faint, violet light of the Cygnian dawn was creeping into the room. The bed beside her was cold. A thread of pure anxiety pulled her upright. "Cade?" She slid from the bed, pulling a silk sheet around her, and walked into the main room. He was on the private balcony, overlooking the awakening city. He was sitting cross-legged, perfectly still, his back to her. He was staring at his open left hand. She stood in the doorway, the cold marble floor chilling her feet. She watched him. His gaze was intense, focused. His right index finger was moving, tracing complex, invisible patterns across his palm. It was a memory trace, a mnemonic technique for recalling complex data. She had seen scholars do it, but the symbols he traced, they were not Litherian, they were not Vron, they were archaic, angular, and sharp. Lines and sigils that she had seen only once before, in the deepest, most restricted files in her father's royal archive. Data slabs recovered from the radioactive ruins of old Earth, labeled Dynastic Era, Danger Extinct. They were the dynastic sigils of the great Terran houses, the Trillionaire bloodlines that had owned the galaxy and had torn their own world apart in a final apocalyptic war. He was tracing a code that belonged to a forgotten, outlawed, and supposedly annihilated dynasty. He stopped, his hand suddenly closing into a tight fist. He had sensed her. He rose to his feet in a single fluid motion and turned. His face was a mask in the cold pre-dawn light, his eyes holding the flat, dead light of a distant star. "You're awake," he said. His voice was not the voice of her husband. It was the voice of a stranger. Serenia stood there, clutching the sheet, the cold air raising goosebumps on her skin. She finally, truly understood her father's words. She had not married a nothing. She had married a secret. And she was beginning to believe it was the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. The violet dawn of Cygnus Alpha did nothing to warm the chill in their quarters. The balcony doors were sealed, but the confrontation that had begun there now filled the room. A pressurized, toxic silence. Serenia stood, the silk sheet still clutched around her, a pathetic shield against the man she had married. He was dressed now, back in a simple dark tunic, his face a mask of calm. "Dynastic sigils," she said, her voice a low, tight vibration. "You were tracing the sigils of a dead Terran house, the same houses that burned old Earth. The same day an assassin tries to kill you with a blade, and you move like a member of the Imperial Guard's Shadow Division." She took a step toward him, her fear hardening into anger. "I am not a fool, Cade. I am not a child to be protected. I am your wife. Who are you?" He looked at her, and the distance in his eyes was a physical blow. "I am the man you chose." "You are not," she cried, the sound ripping from her. "The man I chose was a scholar. He was a quiet, humble poet. He was poor, and he was honest." "Was he?" Cade replied, his voice dangerously soft. "Or was that just what you wanted to see? Did you ever once ask why I was on a dead archive planet? Why did a humble scholar have clearance for the restricted stacks? You are evading me." "I am protecting you," he countered, his voice rising, a flash of steel. "The man who tried to kill me was not a common thief. He was a Kalan series infiltrator, expensive and utterly deniable. He was sent by someone who is afraid of what I might be. And if they knew what I was, they would burn this entire system to get to me." He stepped toward her, his hands clenched at his sides. "So I am telling you, Serenia, for your own sake, for the sake of your empire, let this go." He looked at her, his eyes pleading, but his tone was a command. "There are things you are safer not knowing. Yet." Serenia flinched as if he had struck her. The evasion was a wall of ice. He was treating her like an outsider, a security risk in her own marriage. "So that is how it will be," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper of ice. "We are married, but we are not partners. We are—" "What exactly? A legal arrangement?" "Seren, do not," she said, holding up a hand. "Do not use my name like that. Not while you are lying to me." The return to the Letherian capital was a journey of excruciating silence. They were assigned a diplomatic cruiser, fast and sterile. They occupied separate cabins. Her guards, sensing the chasm between the royal couple, were tense and confused. The galactic media, having feasted on the story of the gala, now sensed the rift. Princess of Beggars gets cold shoulder. Honeymoon over? The human pet left in the doghouse. She ignored the headlines. She ignored the worried comms from her attendants. She spent the entire journey staring at a star chart, feeling the cold of deep space creep into her bones. She had married a stranger, a dangerous, lethal stranger who had lied to her from the first poem he ever read. While their cruiser cut through hyperspace, a different kind of gathering was taking place, deep in the shadow protocols of the galactic elite. It was a virtual summit, the participants represented by holographic avatars in a secure, non-spatial nexus. The room was dark, the only light coming from the glowing, faceless figures of the most powerful people in the galaxy. Duke Xylos, the marble-skinned suitor, was there. His avatar a shimmering column of geometric light. Princess Kaelin's father, the Vronian patriarch, was a swirling cloud of dark energy. Warlord Thrax was a massive armored colossus. Representatives from the Keltari shipyards, the energy cartels of the core, and the AI guilds of Mechanis were all present. The Letherian situation is a mockery, the Vronian patriarch's avatar hissed, the sound like static. But it is a distraction from the real threat. We agree, Duke Xylos's avatar pulsed. The economic destabilization has accelerated by 9% in the last cycle. A central holodisplay lit up, showing a complex map of the quadrant. But it was not a map of planets. It was a map of assets. A ghost is moving through our markets. A new voice, the representative of the banking guild, said, "A single unknown entity. In the last 6 months, this entity has used a network of over 1,000 dummy corporations to acquire controlling interest in..." The list appeared. The Fornax Prime War shipyards, the primary AI vault on Mechanis, and as of 3 days ago, the banker's avatar paused. 51% of the helium-3 refinement rights on the 7 energy moons of the Cygnus system. The room fell silent. Warlord Thrax's avatar actually took a step back. That is impossible. That is military-grade infrastructure. That is not an investment. That is a war chest. Who is it? Duke Xylos demanded. The Kaelin? The Thrax? It is none of us, the Vronian patriarch said. We are all being bled. This entity, it pays in untraceable pre-war Terran bullion, and with data credits so clean they pass every known filter. We have one lead, the banker said. The display changed. It showed a fragment of encrypted code, recovered from a deep data hack of the Mechanis vault transfer. Our analyst broke a single layer of the encryption. They found a name. The name hung in the air, written in archaic Terran script, Cade Linden. Beneath it, a symbol appeared, an angular, sharp sigil, the same symbol Cade had traced on his palm. Linden, Warlord Thrax mused. Terran, lowborn. There was a Cade attached to the Letherian princess, wasn't there not? The human pet. Duke Xylos pulsed, his light flickering with agitation. It must be a coincidence. A nothing from a dead world cannot be the same entity buying energy moons. Perhaps, the Vronian patriarch said, his avatar swirling. Or perhaps the Letherian Empire is playing a deeper game than we thought. Find out who this Cade Linden is. Find out where he came from. Tear his fabricated past apart, piece by piece. I want to know what color his blood is. If he is the ghost, we will hunt him. If he is not, we will use him. Serenya's return was not the triumphant arrival of a newlywed princess. It was a quiet, cold docking at a private imperial port. Her father, the emperor, was waiting for her, not with a welcoming party. He was flanked by his imperial praetorians, their black and gold armor absorbing the light in the hangar bay. You have failed, he said, not as a greeting, but as a judgment. He did not even look at Cade, who stood 10 paces behind her, silent and observant. Father, Serenya said, her voice flat, not only did you humiliate our house, You allowed yourself to be publicly shamed by the Vron, and you have returned with distance from your new acquisition. His eyes were like chips of granite. I had hoped you had merely married a fool. I would have preferred it. What do you mean? Serenia asked, a new cold dread settling over her. I mean, the Emperor said, that I did what you should have done. I investigated the man you brought into my family. I did not like what I found. You spied on me? She hissed. On him? I am an emperor, he snapped. I spy on everyone, especially those who sleep next to my only heir. You will come with me. Now. He looked past her at Cade. He will be escorted to his quarters, and he will remain there. The Praetorians moved, their force pikes humming, creating a respectful but unbreachable wall between Cade and Serenia. Cade did not resist. He did not even look surprised. He just watched her, his expression unreadable, as the guards escorted him away. It was that impassivity, that cold acceptance, that angered her more than any lie. He had expected this. Serenia, furious and unnerved, followed her father deep into the station's command core, to a place she had not been since she was a child. The Imperial Intelligence Vault. It was a cold, circular room, the walls alive with data streams. Her father's chief intelligence minister, a thin, bird-like man named Vey, was waiting. Your Highness, Vey twittered, not meeting her eyes. Show her, the Emperor commanded. A holographic display lit up. It showed the gala on Cygnus Alpha. But this was not the public feed. This was a grainy, high-angle shot from a spy drone. She watched the entire encounter with Princess Kaelin. Trivialities, the Emperor scoffed. Now, show her the attack. The feed changed. She saw the assassin drop. She saw Cade move. But this feed was different. It was a high-spectrum thermal scan. Cade, in this vision, was a creature of ice-blue calm. The assassin was a flare of red-hot aggression. But as Cade moved, Vey slowed the footage. Note the biospikes, Your Highness, Vey said. The assassin's heart rate is at 190 beats per minute. The subject's... He pointed to Cade. His heart rate drops from 72 beats per minute to 64. At the moment of impact, it is a flat 60. He enters a controlled metabolic trance. This is not a panic response. This is a trained biological protocol. And the weapon, the Emperor said, his voice grim. The feed enhanced the object that fell from Cade's sleeve, the microfilament. It is not Litherian, Serenia whispered. It is not from this era, Vey corrected. It is a Terran mantis wire, dynastic era, forbidden by every treaty, lethal, untraceable. We have not seen one in 500 years. He is a spy, Serenia said, her stomach twisting. Sent by who? The Vron? He is not a spy, the Emperor said. A spy has a master. A spy has a file. This man has no past. He does not exist. He appeared on Xylos 9 2 years ago, with baseline credentials. Before that, nothing. One cannot be nothing, Father. Ah, Vey said, but one can, if one has the technology to scrub the galaxy's records, which brings us to our final measure. The bird-like man walked to a dark console. We have one. Relic, recovered from the ruins of old Earth, an AI construct from the Dynasty Wars. We keep it shielded, of course. A containment field in the center of the room lit up, revealing a swirling, unstable core of black and red light. It felt angry. It is a war mind, the Emperor said. We do not commune with it, but we do ask it questions. We fed it all the data we have, Vey explained, his voice nervous. The bioscan, the mantis wire, the name Cade Linden, the dynastic sigils he was seen tracing. We asked one question. Identify. The room lights dimmed. The black and red core pulsed, and a voice spoke. A sound of static, iron, and a billion dead souls. Subject logged. Name, Caden. House, Routh Linden. Serenya's blood turned to ice. Routh Linden. The Routh Linden. Not a house, the house. The one from the history texts. The ones who built the first orbital rings. Who weaponized antimatter. Who owned stars. Status. The AI continued, its voice devoid of emotion. Heir Prime. Bloodline. Routh Linden. Primary. Asset control. 38% of the known galactic economy prior to the fall. Serenya stumbled back, her hand grabbing the console for support. 38%. This is a mistake, she breathed. They were all killed. The warlord cartels hunted them. They are extinct. Subject, Caden Routh Linden. The AI droned, as if she had not spoken. Status, dormant. Asset value, uncalculable. Threat, Omega. The voice stopped. The red and black light swirled and vanished. Serenya stared at the empty space. Shock, betrayal, confusion. The words spun in her head. A trillionaire, not a beggar. A trillionaire. The single richest heir in the history of the galaxy. He had not married her for her money. He had not married her for her fleet. He had married her. Why? You see, the Emperor said, his voice a low growl. He is not a pet. He is a dragon, masquerading as a mouse, sleeping in my daughter's bed. He is the last heir of a bloodline that ate galaxies for breakfast, and the warlord cartels, the Vron, the Thrax, they are the descendants of the very people who slaughtered his family. Her mind was reeling. The poetry, the humble insight, the quiet strength. It was all a lie, a performance, a 5,000-year-old dynasty's heir, hiding in plain sight. He lied to me, she whispered, the words tasting like acid. The humiliation she felt before was nothing. This was a betrayal of reality itself. Yes, the Emperor said, he did. And now you will find out why. She did not walk to their quarters. She ran. The Praetorians at the door saw the look on her face and simply stepped aside. She slammed the door open. Cade was standing by the viewport, looking out at the capital planet below. He was not surprised. He turned to face her, his expression one of deep, profound sadness. You knew, she said, her voice shaking with a rage so deep it vibrated in her bones. You knew they would find out. I knew this day would come, he said quietly. Caden Routh Linden. She spat the name. Heir Prime, Omega-level threat, owner of 38% of the galaxy. He flinched, just slightly, at the name. That was my family's legacy. It is not mine. Do not lie to me, she screamed. Not anymore. Was any of it real? Poetry? The archive planet? Or was I just the best cover you could find? A stupid, naive princess to hide behind? It was all real, he shouted back, his own control finally shattering. The cold stranger was gone, and in his place was a man in agony. The poetry was real. The archive was my only solace. And you were the only real thing that has happened to me since the day I was born. He stalked toward her, his eyes burning. Do you have any idea what that name means? My family, we were not just rich. We were a gravitational force, and when we fell, it created a black hole. He grabbed her arms, his grip desperate. The people who sit on that galactic summit, the Vron, the Thrax, the cartels, they are the ones who butchered my family. They slaughtered my parents, my sisters, my cousins, all in the name of freedom and corporate restructuring. They hunted us, down to the last child. His voice broke. raw with a grief that was centuries old. I was 6 years old when they burned our world. I have been hiding for my entire life. I have been Cade the nobody, Cade the scholar, Cade the pet. Anything to stay alive, anything to be free. You should have told me, she whispered, the fire of her rage guttering in the face of his pain. Told you what? He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. That the man you were falling in love with was the galaxy's most wanted man? That marrying me was not a social humiliation, but a death sentence? I wanted to be free. And when I met you, I was, for the first time, I was not Caden Roth Linden, the heir. I was just Cade, the man who was in love with a princess. He let go of her, his hands dropping to his sides. If they knew who I was, if you had known, I would never be free to love you. You would have seen the legacy, the monster, the dragon. You would not have seen me. She stared at him, her heart torn in two. The shock, the betrayal. It was all still there. But now it was mixed with a terrible, profound understanding. He had lied to protect himself. He had lied to be loved for himself. And the money? She asked, her voice small. The shipyards? The energy moons? His face hardened again. That is not money. That is my family's stolen legacy. And I am taking it back. I am taking back the tools they used to murder my family, and I will use those tools to ensure it never happens again. So it is about power, she accused. It is about justice, he roared. They stared at each other, a chasm of trillions of credits and 500 years of blood between them. I cannot, Serenia said, shaking her head, tears of anger and confusion blinding her. I cannot be in this room. I cannot look at you. She felt suffocated by the lies, by the scale of it all. You did not just lie to me, Cade. You lied to the galaxy. You made me a fool on a cosmic scale. Serenia, please, he said, reaching for her. She slapped his hand away. Do not touch me. I need air. I need to think. She turned and fled. She ran from the quarters, ignoring his call. She pushed past her own guards, who looked at her in alarm. Princess, wait! Leave me alone, she commanded. She ran, her royal boots slipping on the polished floors of the station. She did not know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away from him. From the lie. From the man who was both her husband and the galaxy's greatest secret. She burst out into one of the station's public atriums, a vast bubble of green parks and holographic skies. People, citizens, merchants, tourists milled about. She was anonymous here, for a moment. She leaned against a railing, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of a world that had just inverted. Her husband was not a beggar. He was a king of a dead and buried dynasty, back to reclaim his throne of fire and blood. She was so lost in her own turmoil. She did not notice the three figures who detached themselves from the crowd. They did not look like mercenaries, they looked like tourists, like merchants. They surrounded her. A beautiful view, princess, one of them said, his voice polite. Before she could even react, a hand clamped over her mouth, a cloth pressed tight. It was not a chemical. It was a biodampener, instantly shutting down her higher motor functions. A sharp, stinging prick in her neck, her legs buckled. Her last furious thought was of Cade. She was dragged, seamlessly, into the moving crowd, her body supported by the three men. A public transport slid open. They bundled her inside. As her vision grayed and the world dissolved, she saw the insignia on the back of the hand covering her mouth. It was not the Vron. It was not the Thrax. It was the black and silver sigil of the Keltari warlord, the rival empire that had vied for her hand. the ones who had just been at the secret summit, the ones who had just learned of a ghost named Lyndon. The Praetorian guards at the door were statues of polished, unyielding duty. When Serenia fled past them, their first instinct was to follow, to protect her. "No," Cade said, his voice a low command. "Stay with me. She will be back." The guards hesitated, torn between the princess's flight and the consort's order. They remained, flanking his door, an honor guard that was now a prison detail. Cade stood in the center of the room, the silence a ringing void. The echo of her accusation, "a cosmic fool," was louder than any alarm. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing, the practiced metabolic calm he had shown on Cygnus Alpha falling over him. But this time, it was not to fight, it was to think. He had let her walk into the one place he had not accounted for, the open, unsecured public decks of her own station. A chime. His personal hidden communicator, not the Letherian one. A single red icon pulsed on his wrist interface. A bio-tracker. Her bio-tracker. The one he had woven into the clasp of a necklace he gave her on Cygnus Alpha. A simple Terran alloy pendant. It was offline. The signal had not just faded, it had been dampened. Abducted. The calm shattered. "Seal the room," he said to himself, a quiet audio command. The locks on his quarters hissed shut. The Praetorians outside banged on the door. "Consort, open this door by order of the Emperor." Cade ignored them. He walked to the wall of his simple study, the one with the dusty books of poetry. He pressed his palm to a copy of Keats. The wall hissed open, revealing not a safe, but a small, dark alcove. Inside was a simple gray spacesuit and a single ugly pilot's helmet. He donned the suit in seconds. The helmet locked onto the collar with a pneumatic sigh. He turned to the main viewport, the one looking out at the glittering planet below. The guards were now trying to cut through the door. The sound of a plasma torch sizzled through the air. Cade walked to the viewport. He placed his hand on the transparastile. Protocol, Flame 6, exit. The viewport did not open. The man-sized pane of transparastile simply dissolved, not into liquid, but into a cloud of pre-programmed utility nanites, which swirled into a vent, leaving a perfect rectangular opening into the hard vacuum of space. He did not hesitate. He stepped out, his magnetic boots clamping to the station's hull. He was just a gray shape against the stars, invisible to any but the most high-resolution sensors, which were all pointed outward, not at the station's own skin. He ran along the hull. Below him, his tiny shielded ship, disguised as a piece of station debris, disengaged its own magnetic locks. He leaped, a 30-meter jump, and the ship's cockpit opened to receive him. The ship was a Routh Linden Wraith Scout. No engines, not in the traditional sense. It bent gravity. It did not fly. It fell in any direction he chose. It dropped away from the station, silent, cold, and faster than any Letherian fighter. In 2 minutes, he was in the shadow of the planet's barren desert moon. He landed in a deep, unnamed canyon, the dust settling around the ship's dark hull. He exited, the moon's thin methane atmosphere swirling at his feet. He stood before a sheer 50-meter cliff of red rock. It looked like any other canyon wall. Cade placed his palm on the rock. He did not speak. He thought of the command, a string of dynastic code transmitted through the interface in his glove. The ground rumbled. The dust vibrated. The cliff face did not open. It retracted. A section of the rock, 100 meters wide, simply slid back, revealing a cavern of impossible size, lit by a cold, blue, ancient light. Inside, they were waiting. They were not humanoid. They were spheres of polished black metal, the size of a man's head. floating in silent, perfect rows of 1,000. Sentinels, his ancestors had called them, AI-driven assassination and retrieval units. And behind them, in the back of the cavern, stood the Guardians. There were only 12. Each was 3 meters tall, skeletal, and impossibly thin, built of a silvery white metal that seemed to drink the light. They had no faces, just a single pulsing, ruby-red optic. They were not soldiers. They were executioners, the personal guard of his bloodline. Cade walked into the cavern, his helmet retracting. The air was sterile, ancient. "Awaken," he said. One word. The blue lights in the cavern shifted to a hard, clinical white. 1,000 red optics and 12 larger ones snapped to life, focusing on him. "Target," a voice spoke, synthesized from the air itself, the collective resonance of the Sentinels. "Designation, Princess Serenia Routh Linden, consort." "She has been taken," Cade said, his voice flat, all emotion burned away, leaving only the cold core of command. "Kidnapper, Keltari warlord. They used a biodampener. Find her." The Sentinels rose, a black tide, and poured from the cavern mouth, accelerating into the void at impossible speeds. They did not need hyperspace. They tore small, temporary holes in reality, micro-jumps that would carry them across the quadrant in minutes. Cade walked to the center of the room, to a command interface. He put his hand on it. Status. He saw what the Sentinels saw, 1,000 viewpoints streaking through the cosmos. They scanned hyperlanes. They analyzed energy signatures. They hunted for the specific faint radioactive decay of a Keltari military drive. It took 7 minutes. "Target acquired," the synthesized voice echoed in the cavern. "Vessel located. Ashes sector, sublight, moving toward coordinate K90, a volcanic asteroid, known pirate haven, uncharted." "They will be there in 4 hours," Cade said. "We will be there in 30 minutes, the Guardian's collective voice replied. Cade returned to his ship. He did not take the Sentinels. He did not take the Guardians. They had their orders. He had his own. The fortress on K90 was a masterpiece of paranoia. It was built inside the hollowed-out crust of a massive, geologically active asteroid. Rivers of magma flowed beneath the station's armor-plated floors, a perfect, natural, and untraceable energy source. It was a place for deniable operations, a black site where empires could make problems disappear. Serenia was in a cell of dark, pitted metal. The biodampener was gone, but her limbs were heavy, her head aching from the neurotoxin. She was bruised, her lips split, but her eyes were clear and full of fire. The Keltari warlord, a man named Vorlag, stood outside her energy-barred door. He was a mountain of scarred flesh and cybernetic enhancements. He had been one of the suitors at the choosing. The Marble Duke Xylos. "He wanted you dead," Vorlag mused, his voice a synthesized growl. "He paid us handsomely. But then, the summit. News of the ghost." He smiled, a horrific expression. "Cade Linden." He leaned closer, his one good organic eye studying her. "So, we decided to renegotiate. A living princess, married to a supposed Terran heir, is worth so much more than a corpse. Once we verify his identity, of course." "You are a fool," Serenia spat. "My father will burn this rock. Your father," Vorlag laughed, "is wondering which of his rivals to blame. He will not look here. And your human pet, what will he do? Will he cry? Will he quote poetry to us?" "You have no idea," Serenia whispered, a new terrible certainty rising in her. "What you have just done." "We have captured a prize," Vorlag snarled. You have signed your own death warrant. Cade's Wraith Scout drifted through the asteroid field, cold and dark, indistinguishable from the other chunks of volcanic rock. He docked at a forgotten maintenance airlock, a relic from the asteroid's original mining days. He moved through the service tunnels, a gray shadow in his environment suit. The air was hot, tasting of sulfur and ozone. He reached the main power conduit. It was shielded, layered with Keltari military-grade encryption. He placed his palm on the console. A small swarm of nanites, finer than dust, flowed from his glove, sinking into the interface. This was not a hack. It was an invasion. The Routh-Linden Plague was a relic of the Dynasty Wars, an AI-driven weapon that did not just break encryption. It ate it. It learned. It adapted. It evolved. In seconds, it owned the fortress. Grid, compromised, his helmet's AI whispered in his ear. Power, rerouted. Disable internal comms. Disable security protocols. Leave life support and lighting, Cade ordered. He did not want to panic. He wanted confusion. And, he said, opening a panel on his wrist, unleash the mist. He pressed the release. It was a single pressurized canister. It contained nothing but vacuum and a trillion dormant, self-replicating nanoweapons. They poured into the ventilation system. A silent, invisible tide in the detention block. Vorlag was still monologuing when the lights flickered. The main lights died, replaced by the hard alien glow of the red emergency strobes. What is this? Vorlag roared into his comm. Status report, the comm hissed. Static. Useless, he snarled. He looked back at Serenia. Stay here. Ponder your new life as a guest. He sealed her cell and stalked out, his heavy boots thudding down the corridor. Serenia waited. The silence of the station was profound. The thrum of the engines, the hum of the ventilators. All gone. Then, the screaming started. It was distant at first. A single panicked shout, cut off mid-syllable, then another, then a chorus. It was coming from the main barracks, down the hall. She heard a new sound, a faint, liquid hissing. A guard sprinted past her cell door, his face a mask of pure terror. He was not running from an enemy. He was running from nothing. He clawed at his armor, which was smoking, dissolving from the inside out. He collapsed, his weapon melting in his hand, a pool of gray sludge spreading from his body. Serenia recoiled from the bars, her hand over her mouth. The gray mist Vorlag had dismissed poured under her cell door. It was silver blue in the red emergency light. It filled the cell, ankle deep, swirling like smoke, but it did not touch her. It swirled around her feet, a meter away, as if honoring a barrier only it could see. It recognized her. The pendant around her neck, the Terran alloy, was a biosignature. The fortress was dying. The nanites were not just killing. They were consuming. They were programmed for one thing: disassemble all non-registered technology. And in this fortress, only one person was registered. The energy bars to her cell flickered, and then, with a sound like a wet tear, the emitters dissolved. The door slid open with a groan. She stepped out into the corridor. It was a charnel house, armor, weapons, consoles, all reduced to piles of fine metallic dust. The red lights pulsed, casting long, horrific shadows. She heard a single remaining set of footsteps, heavy, cybernetic, Vorlag. He emerged from the command center, his armor pitted and smoking, but holding. He had sealed himself inside. He saw her. He saw the melted door. He saw the dust piles that were his men. Which? He breathed. What? What are you? And then he saw him. Cade walked out of the smoke and the red light, his gray suit untouched. The nanite mist parted for him like the sea, swirling around his boots. He looked up, his helmet's visor a black, emotionless void. He was a god of destruction, a phantom from a dead world. "Lyndon," Vorlag growled, recognizing the impossible. He raised his heavy plasma rifle, the one thing the mist had not yet claimed. He fired. The bolt of plasma, hot enough to melt a bulkhead, screamed across the corridor. Cade did not dodge. He did not move. He simply raised his hand. The mantis wire, the forbidden tech, unspooled from his wrist. It was not a single strand. It was a fan of 5, energized filaments that solidified into a small, shimmering shield. The plasma bolt struck it and dissipated, splashing harmlessly. Vorlag's one good eye went wide. Cade's hand snapped shut. The wires became a single energized whip. He took one step. Serenia watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was not afraid of him. She was awestruck. He was terrifying. When he was cold, he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was not a fight. It was, as she had seen on Cygnus Alpha, an execution. Cade moved in that same impossible blur. The wire sang. It wrapped around the rifle, shearing it in half. It snapped back. Vorlag raised his cybernetic arm to block. The wire passed through the metal as if it were water, severing the arm at the shoulder. Vorlag roared, a sound of pain and disbelief. He swung with his remaining, organic fist. Cade caught the fist. He stopped the momentum of a 400-pound, cybernetically enhanced warlord with one hand. "She is my wife," Cade said, his voice synthesized by the helmet, cold as the void. He used his free hand, the one with the wire, and gently, almost clinically, tapped Vorlag on the chest. The warlord froze. He looked down. There was no wound, but the nanites on the wire had been delivered. A gray patch was spreading from the contact point. His armor, his cybernetics, his flesh. It was all coming apart. Vorlag looked up at Cade, his face a mask of ultimate terror. He opened his mouth. He dissolved into dust. Cade stood there for a moment, the red light washing over his immaculate suit. The screaming had stopped. The fortress was dead. He turned to Serenia. He raised his hands and his helmet retracted, hissing as it folded into his collar. It was him. Just Cade. His face was pale, his eyes ravaged, not by the fight, but by what he had unleashed, by what he had become to save her. She ran. She slammed into his chest, her arms wrapping around his neck, her face burying in his suit. Cade. 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 His arms crushed her to him, one hand tangling in her hair, holding her head as if she were the most precious, fragile thing in the universe. He was shaking. The god of death was shaking. He was crying. She could feel the hot, silent tears on her neck. She was crying too, great, gasping sobs of terror and relief. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're safe. I've got you. You killed them," she wept. "All of them." "Yes," he said, his voice raw. "And I would burn this entire galaxy for you, I would do it all again." He kissed her, and it was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of desperation, of raw, unfiltered emotion. It was salt and sulfur and the taste of survival. It was a promise. The fortress groaned around them, a deep metallic scream. The reactor, being eaten by the nanites, was going critical. "We have to go," he said, his voice still thick. He did not let go of her. He lifted her, cradling her against his chest, and began to run. They ran through the corridors of dust, the red lights flashing their silent warning. They reached the service tunnel. They reached his ship, the airlock sealed, and the tiny ship blasted from the hangar, its gravity drive pressing them into their seats. He piloted them to a safe distance, into the shadow of a neighboring asteroid. They sat, strapped into their chairs, and watched. The volcanic asteroid K90 shuddered. It cracked, A brilliant, white-hot light blazed from its core. Then, it silently, beautifully, and utterly annihilated itself. The shockwave of pure magma and plasma washed over the asteroid field, vaporizing everything for 1,000,000 kilometers. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. Serena was breathing heavily. Cade's hands were gripping the controls, his knuckles white. She unstrapped herself. He unstrapped. They turned to each other in the small, dark cockpit. The argument, the lies, the betrayal, it was still there. But it was dwarfed by what she had just seen. By the fact that he had crossed the galaxy, unleashed an apocalypse, and killed a fortress to get her back. She moved first. She pulled him from the pilot's seat. They did not make it to the ship's small bunk. They collapsed together in the narrow companionway, passion overtaking them like a wildfire. It was not the angry, demanding passion of Cygnus Alpha. It was something deeper. It was a physical confirmation that they were alive. It was a drowning, a surfacing, a desperate anchoring act in a universe that had just tried to tear them apart. They clung to each other, a tangle of limbs, bruising kisses, and whispered, broken words. It was the only sense they could make. Afterward, they lay in the shadows of the cockpit, the distant nebula light painting them in shades of purple. She was curled against his chest, his suit half off, her own clothes torn. She was crying again, but softly this time. She looked up at him, at the face of the man who was a poet and a killer, a beggar and a king. I didn't marry a poor man, she whispered, her voice thick with tears and awe. I married a god pretending to be human. His face twisted in pain. Serena, I am not a god. I am the last of my line, and I am so tired of hiding. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of his jaw. When I ran, I was so angry. You lied to me. I did, he whispered, to protect you. I know, she said, and I was angry because you did not trust me, but I see now. She saw the monster he kept leashed. She saw the power he held back. And she saw the man who had just used it all, not for revenge, not for power, but for her. I choose you again. Caden Routh Linden, she said, her voice firm. I choose you this time. Not despite your power, but because of the heart behind it. Because of the man who cried when he held me. He kissed her, a long, deep, and gentle kiss that sealed the new promise. He pulled her to her feet, helping her dress. He returned to the pilot's seat, his face set. Where do we go? She asked, strapping in beside him. We go home, Cade said, his hand finding hers. We go back to your father, and we tell him the truth. The game is over. The Wraith Scout turned, leaving the field of debris, and fell toward Litharian space. The news of the K-90 fortress's annihilation was not the story. The fortress was a ghost, a black site that did not exist. The story was the seismic, instantaneous collapse of the Keltari warlord's entire economic structure. It began 3 hours after Cade and Serena returned to the Litharian capital. The Keltari shipping conglomerate, which held a monopoly on 3 quadrants, simply stopped. Its routing codes went dark. Its credit accounts were frozen, then emptied. The trillions in assets redirected to untraceable pre-fall Terran vaults. The galaxy held its breath. Then, the Vron Ascendancy's energy refining monopoly, the one built on the 7 moons of Cygnus, defaulted. Its automated systems began redirecting refined helium-3 to neutral non-aligned systems for free. Duke Xylos's genetic modification labs, his source of power and wealth, had their central AI vaults wiped, their 500-year-old dynastic research data replaced with a single, repeating line of Terran text. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. Panic ripped through the galactic markets. Governments, built on the corrupt foundations of these conglomerates, found themselves bankrupt in a single day. The Vron government collapsed. The Keltari military split into warring factions, their ships unable to refuel. The stock markets of a dozen systems simply dissolved. The ghost who had been buying assets was now liquidating them. And in the ensuing chaos, a new, unified narrative emerged, blasted from every media channel the old guard still controlled. They had found their scapegoat. It was not the mysterious Caden Routh Linden. He was a phantom, a rumor, a dead man. It was her. The golden seductress, how Serenia traded her crown for the galaxy. Hollow images, skillfully modified, showed Serenia whispering in Cade's ear at the Cygnus Gala, her face a mask of cunning greed. The Princess of Beggars was a power broker. Analysts and pundits, their salaries paid by the very cartels that were collapsing, went on air. She found him, one analyst sneered, his reptilian eyes blinking. She found the last pathetic heir of a dead line, a broken man with the keys to an ancient vault, and she seduced him. She used her body and her title to gain control of his assets, and in her greed, she has plunged us all into war. The smear campaign was total. It was brilliant. She was not just a fool, she was a villain, a cosmic-scale seductress who had doomed them all for power. The Litherian Empire, her father's empire, was the only power still stable, buffered by its own vast reserves. But the pressure was immense. The remnants of the Galactic Summit, the surviving, terrified leaders, demanded justice. They demanded a public accounting. The Emperor must prove his hands are clean, the Thrax warlord broadcast from a hidden bunker. He must give us the witch. He must give us Serenia. Her father, caught between his collapsing rivals and his own enraged daughter, chose the only path an emperor could. He chose theater. He called for a public tribunal, to be held on the Litherian capital moon, broadcast to every surviving star in the galaxy. To find the truth, he said, and to restore order. The capital moon tribunal hall was a place of cold, white marble and hard, acoustic dampening lines. It was a place designed to make individuals feel small. A single raised platform stood in the center, surrounded by the floating observation decks of the galactic representatives. Billions watched. Serenia walked to the platform alone. She wore a simple, sleeveless white gown, the traditional color of Litherian mourning. She wore no crown. Her radiant hair was unbound. She was not a princess, not a seductress. She was a target. She looked up. Duke Xylos was there, his new cloned body looking pale and furious. The Thrax warlord was a grim hologram. The remnants of the Vron ascendancy, cousins and rivals of Kalen, were a row of bronze-skinned judges. Princess Serenia, the chief adjudicator began, his voice amplified. You are here to answer for your role in the greatest economic destabilization in galactic history. I am here, Serenia said, her voice quiet but carrying. Because you are afraid, the mockery began. Afraid? Duke Xylos scoffed. We are enraged, Madame. Did you know? When you chose that human, did you know he held the keys to the Routh Linden fortune? I did not, Serenia said. A convenient answer, a Vronian representative shouted. So you expect this tribunal and the billions watching to believe you just happened to fall in love with the single richest entity in the known universe? Love? Xylos laughed, a dry, brittle sound. Do not insult us. You saw an opportunity. You saw an ancient broken tool, and you picked it up. You played him, and in doing so, you have broken us all. Objection, Serenia said, her voice still quiet. The adjudicator paused, surprised. This is not a court, Princess. This is a tribunal. It is a coward's theater, Serenia replied, her gaze sweeping the accusers. She turned, not to the adjudicator, but to the central broadcast drone that was sending her image to the galaxy. She spoke to the billions, not the dozen. You have accused me of seducing a man for power, she said, her voice resonating with a new, cold strength. You have accused me of greed. You mock me, and you mock him. And in doing so, you reveal your own pathetic, bankrupt souls. She pointed a finger, not at one, but at all of them. You are the ones who see only the price. You see a man, and you ask, what is he worth? You see an alliance, and you ask, what can it buy? You saw me, a woman you called the princess of beggars, and you laughed, because to you, a person's value is their bank account. The tribunal members were shifting, uneasy. This was not the confession they had expected. You ask if I knew. I will tell you the truth. No. I did not know he was the heir to a trillion-credit dynasty. I did not know he held the keys to your shipyards or your energy moons. She took a breath, her voice softening but burning. I knew he was a man who read poetry in a dusty room. I knew he was a man who was kind, who was quiet, and who was not afraid to stand next to me when the entire galaxy called him a zero. I chose him because in a life surrounded by men who wanted to own me, he was the only one who simply saw me. Her voice rose, filling the hall. You clothe yourselves in power. You buy your strength. You modify your genes, and you are so terrified of losing it. You cannot comprehend a love that exists without condition. You cannot comprehend a bond that is not a balance sheet. She looked directly at the drone. You did not lose your empires because of me. You lost them because you built them on foundations of greed, and the first man who came along who valued justice over profit. He caused your entire hollow world to collapse. A profound, shocked silence filled the hall. The adjudicator was speechless. Duke Xylos was white with rage. And for that, Serenia finished, her voice a whisper that was a roar. I will not apologize for him. I will never apologize. She stood there, defiant, having signed her own death warrant. The adjudicator finally found his voice, his face purple. This is an admission. This is treason against the galactic order. You will be censured. You will be... He was cut off. The lights in the tribunal hall flickered and died, replaced by a cold, golden-white glow. It was not coming from the hall's emitters. It was coming from outside. A collective gasp went up. Every person in the hall turned to the massive viewports. The sky, which had been a clear, black, star-dusted field, was now full. A fleet had arrived, but they were not Lithirian. They were not Keltari. They were not warships, covered in armor and weapon ports. They were sleek, pearlescent, ovoid ships, the color of bone and gold, moving with a silent, impossible grace. They looked ancient, beautiful, and lethal. They looked Terran, from an age of art and total war. What is this? The adjudicator stammered. Who dares? The central broadcast feed, which had been fixed on Serenia, dissolved into static. A new image replaced it, Caden Routh Linden. He stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Athenium. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a simple black uniform, marked only with the angular silver sigil of his house. Behind him, the 12 skeletal, ruby-eyed guardians stood at attention. His voice filled every speaker, every comm, every channel in the galaxy. It was the calm, placid voice of the poet. And it was the cold, absolute voice of the man who had vaporized a fortress. This tribunal is concluded, he said. As one, the golden ships moved, forming a perfect protective ring around the Lithirian capital moon. In the hall, panic erupted. An invasion! He has come to finish it. He has come to take power. Idona Duke Xylos was already sprinting for an escape pod. A single ship, Cade's personal Wraith Scout, detached from the fleet and descended. It did not ask for landing clearance. It burned through the atmosphere, landing with a soft gravitational sigh on the tribunal platform itself, inches from a terrified adjudicator. The cockpit opened. Cade walked out. He was alone. He moved through the chaos. The Praetorian guards, her father's men, raised their rifles, uncertain. "Stand down," Cade said, and they did. The authority in his voice was absolute. He walked directly to Serenia, who stood unmoving, her eyes locked on his. He ignored the panicking nobles, the shouting adjudicator, the entire collapsing order. He stopped in front of her. His face was unreadable. "Caden Routh Linden," the adjudicator shrieked, finding a burst of courage. "You are hereby under arrest for galactic piracy, for, Cade said, turning to look at the man. Holding up a mirror, he faced the broadcast drone, his voice once again projecting to the billions. "My name is Caden Roth Linden, my ancestors. They were tyrants. They were monsters. They were, in every way, just like you." He gestured to the cowering tribunal. They saw the galaxy as something to be owned, and in their greed, they burned our home to ashes. He shook his head. "I am not here to reclaim their empire. I am here to bury it, along with yours. The assets I have seized, the shipyards, the AI vaults, the energy moons, they are not mine. They are yours," he said, speaking to the billions of ordinary people watching, the ones who had suffered under the cartels. "They are the stolen wealth of 1,000 worlds, and I am giving them back." He raised his hand. "As of this moment, the Routh Linden fortune, all 300 trillion credits of it, is dissolved. It is placed in a new, neutral trust. I announce the revival of the Terran Protectorate, not an empire, but a neutral body, governed by Earth's last AI fleet, whose only mandate is to oversee the fair and democratic redistribution of these assets. We will not rule. We will serve. We will help you rebuild a fairer galaxy, a galaxy that is not built on a balance sheet. That is all." He had done it. He had taken the single greatest fortune in history, the power to rule the galaxy, and he had given it away in 30 seconds. The hall was so quiet, Serenia could hear her own heart. Cade turned back to her, a small, private smile touching his lips. He leaned in, his mouth close to her ear, the broadcast drones straining to hear. He whispered, his voice for her, and her alone. "I've set up a new trust, just a small one. It endows the archive on Xylos 9. It will be the greatest center for pre-fall literature in the galaxy. It is our wedding present. Our children will have a library. Not an armory." She gasped, a sharp, choked sound. "The library, the place they met, the poetry, and a future, not an empire, a life." Tears filled her eyes and she nodded, a single convulsive motion. "Let's go home," he said. He took her hand, and together, they walked off the platform. They walked past the stunned adjudicator, past the cowering Duke, past her father's guards. They walked onto the Wraith, and the cockpit sealed. The ship rose, silent and graceful, and joined the golden fleet above. They left the old world behind, to tear itself apart and perhaps to rebuild. That night, they were not in space. They were not on a station. He had taken her to a beach world in a system that had no name, lit by the gentle twin sunset of 2 pale lavender stars. The sand was the color of crushed pearls. The water was luminous. They had shed their uniforms, their royal gowns. They were just two people in simple linen clothes, walking by the phosphorescent surf. They did not speak for a long time. They just were. The noise of the galaxy, the crash of markets, the accusations. It was a distant, dead star. He stopped, turning her to face him. He looked at her, truly looked at her, the poet and the god and the man all in one. He kissed her, and it was not the fire of their rescue, nor the desperate kiss of their reunion. It was gentle. It was passionate. It was, finally, peace. It was a promise of a quiet life, of a new beginning. They lay on a blanket on the sand, the alien stars emerging one by one, a tapestry of impossible beauty. She lay with her head on his chest, his heart beating steadily, slowly, beneath her ear. She finally asked the question, the one that had been there from the very beginning. "Why me?" she whispered to the stars. "Cade. Caden, you are who you are. You could have bought the galaxy. You could have had any woman, any queen, any power, and why me? The princess of beggars?" He was silent for a moment. He ran his hand through her hair, his touch gentle. He looked up at the stars, then back down at her. His eyes, in the faint alien starlight, were clear. "Because when I had nothing," he said, his voice soft, and all trace of the god was gone, leaving only the man. "When I was just dust on an old book in a forgotten room, you still saw me." A year passed. It moved not with the rigid mechanical spin of a station, but with the slow, breathing seasons of a dozen worlds. The galaxy was healing. The Terran Protectorate, the golden fleet of Earth's last AIs, was not a government. It was a utility. Its pearlescent ships arrived not with troops, but with engineers. They brought Routh Linden technology, not as a weapon, but as a cure. They deployed atmospheric scrubbers that cleared the chemical smog from industrial worlds in a single cycle. They released medical nanites that hunted down and cured the bioplagues left over from the cartel wars. They opened the star charts, broadcasting old forgotten hyperspace lanes, connecting worlds that had been isolated for centuries. The shipyards Cade had reclaimed, now governed by the Protectorate, began building harvest ships and medical frigates, not destroyers. The Helium-3 moons, once the fuel of warlords, now powered the lights of 1,000 forgotten colonies. Peace, it turned out, was not just the absence of war. It was the presence of connection. It was the sound of a transport arriving, a market opening, a clean river flowing. And in this new, breathing galaxy, Cade and Serenia vanished. They lived on a world called Ethel, a garden world in the nomenclature of the old explorers, meaning it was beautiful, green, and held no strategic value whatsoever. It was a planet of soft rains, vast, temperate oceans, and continents of rust-red grass. Their home was built into a cliffside overlooking the southern sea. A simple, elegant structure of white stone and local amber-colored wood. It was a house, not a fortress. The gardens were not orbital marvels of bioengineering. They were simple, terraced plots of ground, where Serenia was learning to grow the local sapphire-skinned sky fruit. They were not your highness or lord consort. Here, in the small, wind-swept town of Pyrrha, they were just Serenia and Cade, the locals, simple farmers and fishermen, assumed they were refugees from the recent chaos, wealthy enough to build a nice home, but too quiet to be important. Serenia was pregnant. The radiance that had once been a mark of her Litherian bloodline was now the deeper, softer glow of impending motherhood. She spent her days walking the cliffs, her hand resting on the swell of her stomach. She was not carrying an heir to an empire. She was carrying a child, a son, or a daughter, who would be born free. Cade had found his own purpose. He had not touched the Routh-Linden command interface since the day of the tribunal. His Wraith scout sat in a sealed ocean cave, cold and forgotten. He had become, instead, the town's teacher and mechanic. 3 days a week, he met with the orphans of Pira, children whose parents had been taken by cartel raids years ago. He taught them, not poetry, but planetary navigation. He unrolled old, physical star charts in the town hall and showed them how to find their way, how to read the sky as a map, not of territory, but of possibility. The other day, he fixed things. His hands, which had once traced dynastic sigils and unleashed apocalypse, were now stained with grease. He repaired atmospheric samplers for the farmers. He climbed the high antenna and recalibrated the satellite uplinks, connecting their small town to the new, open galactic trade network. He found a quiet, profound peace in the simple act of making something work. They were, for the first time in their lives, anonymous, and they were happy. The shadow fell on a clear, bright morning. It came without a sound, without a warning. Serenia was in the town market, haggling over a basket of sea kelp, when the sky tore open. They were not Protectorate ships. They were not Litherian. They were black, jagged, and scarred. Ships from the old warlord cartel, markings scraped off, but their silhouette was unmistakable. They were destroyers, angular and bristling with weapons, relics of a bygone era, powered by hate. They did not demand surrender. They simply fired. Plasma lanced down, the central market spire, the town's pride, vaporized. The fishing docks exploded, a rain of fire and shattered wood. The small town hall, where Cade was teaching, collapsed, one wall shearing off, panic, screams. This was not a war. It was an execution. Cade felt the shockwave before he heard the blast. He threw himself over the children, his body a shield. As the wall of the town hall blew inward, he came up, choking on dust, his ears ringing. He saw the ships in the sky, black, jagged, the remnants, the true believers, the ones who had not been at the tribunal, the inner circle of the Thrax and Keltari clans, the sons and grandsons of the men who had personally butchered his family. They had not come for the galaxy. They had not come for the planet. They had come for him. Serenia, across town, was being dragged to a shelter by a panicked farmer. She shoved him away, her face not one of fear, but of cold, incandescent fury. "Get to the shelter," she commanded, her voice the ring of a Litherian princess. She ran, not away, but toward her home on the cliff. "Serenia!" Cade roared, running through the burning street, his mind a vortex of 1,999 scenarios. Run, hide, the wraith, the cave, escape. He saw her, on the cliff path, running away from him, toward their home. "What are you doing?" he screamed. She did not stop. She reached the house, slamming her hand on a panel hidden in the garden wall. "My father is not a fool," she gasped, her voice ragged. "He gave me a wedding gift, too." The cliffside garden parted, the stone and wood house, a simple home, retracted on silent rails, sliding back into the rock, revealing what lay beneath. It was not a house, it was a hangar, and inside sat the radiant Aegis, not the full 10,000 ship fleet, but its heart, a new model Litherian command cruiser, bristling with the latest shields and weapon arrays, staffed by a skeleton crew of her most loyal hand-picked veterans. They had been living here, disguised as gardeners and groundskeepers for a year. Serenia ran up the ramp, pregnant, her hair flying, her face a mask of terrible resolve. "My lady," her old captain, a woman named Alara, shouted, "We We were not expecting. You have your orders, Captain, Serenia said, strapping herself into the command chair, her hands flying over the console. Power up. All systems. Target those destroyers. My husband is in that town. Ilara looked at her princess, at the fire in her eyes, at the regal, furious set of her jaw. This was not the girl who had been mocked. This was a queen. My queen, Ilara whispered. Fierce, brilliant, radiant, all batteries. Unleash. The Aegis rose from the cliff, a blade of silver and gold, and engaged the Black Fleet. In the town. Cade stopped, stunned. He watched his wife's personal flagship, a ship he had never known existed, tear into the sky and open fire. The remnants, shocked by the sudden, heavy resistance, broke formation, and in that moment, Cade's role inverted. He was not the protector. He was the bait. They were here for him, and his wife, his pregnant wife, was fighting his battle. No, he whispered. He ran, not to the caves, not to his ship. He ran to the ruined town hall. The comm tower was still standing, barely. He scrambled up the burning wreckage. He found the long-range transmitter, the one he himself had repaired, and jammed his personal comm unit against it. Ethanium, he said. One word. He broadcast his dynastic code, his Routh Linden signature, amplified by the tower, a flare in the dark. Here I am. And he waited. The battle in the sky was brutal. The Aegis was outnumbered, 3-1. But Serenia was a masterful commander. She did not fight their fight. She did not trade blows. She used the planet's gravity, dipping in and out of the atmosphere, using the canyons as cover, her tactics fluid, brilliant, and unpredictable. She was leading, but she could not win. The Aegis's shields were failing. A plasma bolt tore across her port engine. My lady, Ilara yelled. We cannot hold them. We will hold them, Serenia said, her teeth gritted. He needs more time. A black destroyer, the flagship, broke from the fight. It ignored the Aegis. It turned, its massive cannons powering up, and aimed directly at the town, at the comm tower, at Cade. No, Serenia screamed. And then the sky, for the second time, tore open, a golden light, a perfect geometric tear in space. The pearlescent ovoid ships of the Golden Fleet arrived. Not a dozen, 100, the Guardians. But they did not fire. A single Wraith scout, Cade's own ship from the cave, shot from the planet's surface. He must have used a transport beam. He was in the fight, his voice, cold and ancient, broadcast on all channels, even the Aegis's bridge. Scion Thrax, this is Caden Routh Linden. Your war is with me, not with them. Stand down. Land your ship. We will end this. The black flagship, the Harbinger, floated, silent. A truce. Routh Linden, a new voice snarled, full of static and hate. The son of the great dragon asking for a truce? You are weak. You are pathetic. I'm offering you peace, Cade's voice replied. It is over. The blood debt is paid. The money is gone. There is nothing left to fight for. There is you, Thrax roared. As long as one of your bloodlines breathes, the war is not over. You will die, and we will... He was cut off by Cade. I offered you peace. The air changed. The Golden Fleet's ships moved. They did not fire. They did not launch fighters. They simply advanced. The remnant ships, suddenly faced with the full, silent, terrifying power of the Terran AI, panicked. They tried to run. It was not a battle. It was, as Serenia had seen once before, an execution. Precise, energized filaments. The descendants of the mantis wire lashed out from the Golden Fleet. They did not destroy it. They disassembled. They cut engines from hulls. They sheared weapon pods from wings. In seconds, the Black Fleet was a field of tumbling, powerless, Disarmed debris, all except one. The Harbinger. Cade's wraith docked with it. No, Serenia whispered, watching her tactical display. Cade, no. Do not go in there. But he was already gone. She watched, her heart in her throat, as the Harbinger's life support signature flatlined, one by one. The command bridge went dark. 10 minutes later, his wraith undocked and shot back to the planet. The battle was over. The remnant fleet, leaderless, surrendered to the Golden Fleet. Cade's ship landed in the burning plaza. Serenia had already landed the Aegis nearby, its mission done. She was running, her pregnancy forgotten, as the wraith's ramp lowered. He walked out. He was not wearing a suit, just his simple grease-stained clothes from the morning. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. He saw her, and the god of death, the last scion of Routh Linden, dissolved. He was just Cade. He met her halfway, and she fell into his arms. "It is done," he whispered, his voice thick. It is finally done." A cry from the wreckage of the town hall, a small, weak sound. Cade's head snapped up. He looked at Serenia, his eyes full of a new, desperate urgency. He ran, not with the speed of a warrior, but of a father. Serenia followed. She watched him pull burning beams away from the collapsed orphanage. She watched him, the man who had just commanded an AI fleet and dismantled a warlord, digging in the dirt with his bare, bleeding hands. He emerged from the smoke, cradling a small alien girl, her leg broken, crying in terror. He held her, rocking her gently. He was whispering something, a soft, rhyming cadence, an old Terran lullaby. "It is all right," he whispered, his own tears tracing paths in the soot on his face. "It is all over. You are safe." Serenia stopped. She watched her husband, the Trillionaire, the ghost, the killer, cradling a wounded child and weeping with her. And in that moment, she knew. The galaxy had not been saved by his money. The money was a chain. It had not been saved by his power. The power was a curse. The galaxy had been saved by his humanity, by the part of him that loved poetry, that fixed broken satellites, and that held a child as if she were the only thing in the universe. The planet Ethel rebuilt, the Protectorate, and the Litherian Empire sent aid. The town of Pyrrha became a symbol of the new peace. Weeks later, the garden on the cliffside was in full bloom. The radiant Aegis was gone, her mission complete. The Golden Fleet was a distant protective star. Serenia, her time near, was sitting in a chair, watching the twin sunset. Cade was kneeling in the dirt, planting a new row of sky fruit. He was covered in soil. She watched him, her heart full. He finished, wiping his forehead with a dirty arm, and looked up at her, smiling. It was the simple, open smile of the man she had met in a dusty room. She walked to him, her movements slow and graceful. She cupped his face, her thumbs tracing the lines of his jaw. She kissed him, a long, soft kiss that tasted of earth, salt, and peace. "They mocked me," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "They mocked me for marrying a human." He looked at her, his gray-green eyes, the eyes of a poet, holding her. "But you," she said, a tear of pure, quiet joy tracing its way down her cheek. "You were never just a man. You were the future I believed in."